Here on The Point of View, we pick the right topics, get the right guests, and ask them relevant questions on issues that matter to you. We have a very, very somber show for you tonight because we're looking at two important issues. I'm sure you know of the August 6th helicopter crash that took away 8 gallant Ghanaians. Well, the committee that was set up to investigate the cause of the crash released its report yesterday. Tonight, we are delving into highlights of the report and speaking to 3 people from 3 different perspectives on this report. Earlier today, thousands of young Ghanaians massed up at the El-Wak Sports Stadium to be recruited into the Ghana Armed Forces. The numbers were so huge, it led to a stampede, and as we speak, 6 people have died, all female. We're also informed that 12 of them are in fairly critical condition and 5 are in ICU. We'll look at the way the army in Ghana recruits its people and whether this tragedy calls for a change in the way we work. When we come back, we'll tell you who our guests are. Stay with me.
When malaria strikes your home, it strikes everything. No more endless worry because of malaria. Fight malaria back with Vegetem. Vegetem is effective, safe, and fast-acting against malaria. Vegetem tablets stays effective right to the very last tablets. Vegetem is also available in suspension for children. Vegetem, tough on malaria, easy on you.
Kwame and his uncle are almost here.
Wait a minute. This one too, your friend Kwame.
Wait, Kwame. As in the same Kwame again?
Yes, mommy.
The second coming. Into all this tension just to reintroduce that broke boy from Kaswa.
Why would you deceive the family like this again?
Now I understand the whole delay. Troll from Kaswa. Why wouldn't he be late? Or being late?
Of course.
Be the luckiest, go be from Georgia, be luckiest. From not the cause she be luckiest. Me and you go be luckiest. No matter why you're luckiest. Everybody go be the luckiest.
That's Kwame!
Send your God up a boom. If you put it toy, so would the coming of the son of man be. Is that his car?
Everywhere.
Dial *712#. Choose your ticket. Enter your lucky number. Follow the prompts and let destiny handle the rest.
This promotion is regulated by the NLA on the Caritas platform.
Welcome back. So tonight we start off with the tragedy that took away 8 Ghanaians. You remember the President of the Republic directed the Acting Minister of Defense to constitute a committee or an accident investigation board to get into the issues that led to the crash that occurred on the 6th of August. The Z9EH GHF 631 helicopter flying from Accra to Obuasi involved in a crash at Dampia Forest Reserve of Anochi Chrome Brofuyedu in Adansia Krofrom. All 3 crew and 5 passengers on board died. So I'm just going to run it through quickly what this summary presents. Now, it's important to note that the full report hasn't been made public. What we have been given is the presentation by the lead of the team that did the report. And this is in the form of 41 slides that he presented to the press yesterday. I'm going to run through some of the slides. Now, it talks about investigations under these regulations being conducted to determine circumstances leading to the accident and prevention of future accidents and incidents. So what it did was to give us factual information, analysis, conclusions, and then safety recommendations. But all these were done in terms of slides. We don't have the full document. The composition of the board had the National Security, Ghana Armed Forces, the US Air Force staff, as well as Aircraft Accident and Incident Investigation and Prevention Bureau. So those were the 4 main people. Now, what was their methodology? They did what they call factual information and evidence collection. That's the slide that started with a briefing by the Parliament investigation team, by the preliminary investigation team, handing over of the flight recorder and some personal effects of passengers, and visit to the accident site from 28th August to 29th August. Then they did what they call technical examination and data collection, which had two legs: maintenance records, flight logs and crew qualification documents being reviewed, as well as FDR and CVR, flight data recording and cockpit voice recorders, transported to the flight decoding center in China. That was 12 September to 22nd September. They also did what they call human factors and operational information, where they looked at the medical and physiological records of the flight crew and conducted interviews with pilots and others. Then they also did what they call meteorological information investigation. They looked at weather information. They interpreted this using META, RTAF, and eyewitness observation, etc. They also did what they call an organizational and systemic review. And then they did what they call analysis and reconstruction. And then they had what they call findings and courses, as well as recommendations. Now, the scope was sevenfold. Basically, history of the flight, the weather, the machine, which is the aircraft itself, sequence of events, the cause of accident, organizational and systemic factors, and human factors. Now, I don't want to bore you with all the details, but I'll just give you a couple of slides on each subject. So, for example, on the history of the flight, we're told that there were previous flights by this same aircraft on 2nd August from Takoradi to Accra. 1 hour flight was what is called a Medivac. On the 3rd of August, there was an Accra Cape Coast Accra flight as well. 1 hour, 20 minutes, Medivac. And then on the 4th of August, 2 days to the fateful day, there was an Accra Salman Accra flight, 2.5 hours. This was cargo. Then they talk about weather. They showed slides on the weather, morning weather, afternoon weather, looking pretty hazy. They even had what they call the picture of en route weather from a passenger on board the helicopter to a friend before the accident. And then they basically said that the weather in southern Ghana was poor, which delayed departure for about an hour. They also said other things about the Kumasi weather being worse than the Accra weather, with drizzling reducing visibility to around 4 kilometers and heavy low clouds sitting just 600 to 900 feet above the ground. Very important point, only Accra and Kumasi aerodrome weather was available, they say in the report. They also say there was no information on the weather along the flight route available to the pilot. They say witnesses reported poor visibility due to fog and rain at Brofuyedru and its environs. And they also say the kind of rapid changes in environmental conditions over the terrain can result in turbulence, downdrafts, and other phenomena. They had a slide they call downdraft, explaining that turbulent wind currents usually occurring around ridgelines, mountains, and hills, generating sink rates in excess of 1,000 feet per minute in moderate wind conditions, with a picture. They then assessed the machine. They spoke about its history, manufactured in 2012, reached its 10-year service threshold 18 May 2025. The aircraft received a 90-day extension to 18th August, which is 12 days after the crash. Essentially, it was on what they call a service extension, and I'm sure later on some of my guests may explain this, right? But they said this was with the manufacturer's approval. We are told that the aircraft on the day was declared serviceable and duly signed off by the captain. The FDR report indicated that the helicopter was in good working condition, but they also state that the helicopter, however, lacked some avionics safety enhancements, and they mentioned about 4 of them. Lack of key safety equipment, including what they call terrain awareness and warning systems, advanced navigation with terrain mapping, automatic flight control system, and stated that these safety equipment could have enhanced situational awareness. Even before finishing the analysis, they do a recommendation on this slide where they say, we have recommended strongly for aircraft with these additional safety enhancements to be acquired immediately. They then examined the human factors, ruling out incompetence or fatigue. Basically, I won't spend time on this because there was some speculation in the media that the captain may not have been in the right frame of mind. But they did say that to rule out any potential human causes, they examined the qualification, experience, and competence of the crew, and also their state and frame of mind. And they ruled out fatigue or any other thing. Then they do what's called the sequence of events, where they mention when the flight left. Let me just read those 4 quick paragraphs. The flight departed Accra under VFR in marginal weather. the flight to Brofuyedru was uneventful, approximately 90 nautical miles out of 100. At 9:56 or 0956 a.m., the crew entered clouds and transitioned into IFR. All right. Seconds before impact, the crew stated they could see high grounds below. And then it says, suddenly after, the helicopter lost height without change of power or pitch attitude and impacted a ridgeline at 1,370 feet above sea level, about 6.5 miles from the destination. Then they show this flight path sequence of events. And then they talk about their findings. The helicopter was airworthy but lacked additional safety enhancements for flying safer in the weather phenomena over the terrain. Adverse weather, limited visibility, rising terrain, and no ground-based navigation aid en route. They also say emergency response was timely. Then they say the cause of accident was determined to be the sudden loss of altitude and lift due to the downdraft. This loss of altitude without change in power or pitch attitude was consistent with downdraft associated with the changing environmental conditions over high terrain. They also identify a number of systemic and organizational failures, limited navigational capability for en route and remote areas, enhanced training. There was no simulator training, no flight data monitoring, no secondary surveillance radar, automatic dependent surveillance broadcast. All of that was absent. Now, let me come to the safety recommendations, because my first guest will speak to those, because he hasn't seen the full report, so he can only comment on the recommendations. So here are the safety recommendations as put out by the team. Modernize the fleet of the Ghana Air Force, specifically acquire modern aircraft with TAWS, EGPWS, and modern navigation systems. He will explain what that means. CVR and FDR with audiovisual capable ties, acquire those as well. Acquire or invest in flight simulators for recurrent training. Contract certified aviation weather provider. Get en route navigational aids. Get flight data monitoring. Get en route tracking systems and ground support equipment. This suggests that all these things we do not have. So to help us appreciate what these recommendations mean, I have Associate Professor of Aviation and Aerospace Services based in the US, himself an experienced pilot, and also a flight crash investigator, Professor Kwesi Ajekum, to help us appreciate some of the nuances presented, particularly in the recommendations. Prof, thanks for joining us. By the nature of your work, I suspect you need to have seen the full report in text to allow you properly analyze this. Is this correct?
Yeah, that is very correct. And thank you for having me on your show. And just a point of correction, it's aerospace sciences, not services.
Aerospace sciences, forgive me. Aerospace sciences. Aerospace. I know there's a big difference there. Good.
Yes, aerospace sciences.
Wonderful. But having not seen the report, you notice I went through the slides that the team lead presented to us. Why is it important for people like you to see the full report?
Yeah, it's very important because as a researcher myself, as an aircraft accident investigator who has been in their position, the background data is very important. Like I stated earlier, a couple of months ago, that as the investigation, it's a very thorough data-driven process. So the conclusions that is reached has to, you should be able to tailor it back to the underlying evidence. That's the data that was collected. And so, sort of, I'm hamstrung because if I don't have, I cannot appreciate the underlying data. I just have to take whatever was presented on face value. And that's why my commentary is sort of, I'm constrained just to comment on what was presented by the team because I've not gone through the underlying data. I mean, for instance, I would have loved to have gone through the transcript of the cockpit voice recorder. I would have loved to see the plotted charts of the parameters. We call it like the aircraft parameter plots. The power settings, the flight control positions, the speed, the orientation. I mean, these are very important data points that will be helpful for me to sort of correlate whatever the conclusions and the findings and the recommendations were with the underlying data. Notwithstanding, I believe that I should be able to pick up snippets and especially focus more on the recommendation because I think that's very salient and we can take it from there.
Before we get to the recommendations, you notice that there was a slide which showed the scope And the scope, at least the summary of the scope, was history of the flight, weather, machine, sequence of events, cause of accident, organizational and systemic factors, and then human factors. How comprehensive are those, and how important is it to have all those legs into an investigation like this?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think, as I explained earlier on my chat with you in the aftermath of that accident, usually the first phase, we deal with collection of factual data, which the team did. And I know, and I've been in their position, it's a very thorough, painstaking job, and I would like to say a big thank you to all of them. And so you collect the factual data. These are things that are undisputable. I mean, it happened, and so you collect it. Yeah, of course, you do some interviews, we did it. And then, of course, another data point is the analysis of the data that was gleaned from the cockpit voice recorders and the flight data recorder. After all has been done, now you come to the analysis itself. This is where we normally use maybe an accident investigation model, or possibly what we call, taxonomies can help like that to classify. And in this case, I in my opinion, I think they were using what we call the 5M model. Okay, so because I heard them mention man-machine management, medium, which is the environment, and so I presuppose they use the 5M model, which is also one of the models out there for accident investigation. So looking at it, at least from the perspective of the slides, I think it's just in line with accepted practices, IQ and X13 practices.
So one of the things we found out just reading the slides was that, of course, the aircraft had done flights on the 2nd, on the 3rd, and the 4th, which means basically it had done regular flights before the 6th. They obviously said the weather was bad, and we all knew this, and they said the weather near Kumasi was worse than the weather in Accra. They did state that even though the machine was cleared to fly, there had been an extension of its service, and I need to read that point, that the aircraft was manufactured in 2012, entered the service in May 2015, and reached its 10-year service threshold on 18 May, but received a 90-day extension to 18 August. Now, without prejudicing anything, what does this mean in English? If you say that an aircraft had reached its 10-year service threshold but received an extension with manufacturer's approval, does the threshold mean that it should stop working, or you need to bring it for servicing?
Yes, so and I think the lead of the investigator also highlighted it that even within industry, normally if a machine is manufactured, you operate it in accordance with the specifications and the laid out maintenance schedule of the manufacturer, which is also approved by, of course, your regulator. In this case, the Ghana Air Force obviously is not under Ghana Civil Aviation Authority. We have our own maintenance standards. And so a lot of times within a period, after 10 years, the manufacturer, as part of its reliability and integrity systems, the manufacturer requires you to bring in the aircraft for what we call heavy maintenance. So they'll check the airframe, they'll check power plant, they'll check systems on board, and that is already pre-laid out. What normally happens is that maybe due to operational constraints, remember, as part of reliability, they give like a percentage of failure, a percentage of operational reliability. And so if, for instance, you want to extend the time that you're supposed to send it in for maintenance, you have to work with the manufacturer and undergo some specific criteria or checks. And that is where they will grant you like an extension. But normally the extension comes with some limitation, which means that if the aircraft has been given an extension, there are certain operational capabilities that nominally the aircraft cannot be used for. that doesn't mean the aircraft cannot be used. Let me give you an example. So, for instance, maybe you're using your car, is due for oil servicing, but due to some constraints, you cannot send in the car for oil servicing. Okay, that doesn't mean that the car needs to be shut down or you need to park your car. Most likely, you can defer and say that, hey, maybe it's not a good analogy, but you can extend it and say that maybe next week I'll be taking it for servicing. That means that if you were supposed to, for instance, travel to Boko, most likely you will not use that car to travel from Accra to Boko. What you rather do is that, hey, you could use the car within your locality, within Accra, just get to work and back. So those are sort of the constraints I'm talking about. So yes, the extension is an industry practice. Even in the airlines, they do it all the time. They give extensions, but you have to work with the manufacturer. And if it's in the case of the civil world, most likely it also has to be looked at by your inspectors. So maybe your airworthiness inspectors to make sure that you are within the full compliance of the extension provided by the manufacturer.
When I listened to the man who did the work and read the report, he basically cleared the human factors, because he said they ruled out any human cause, they examined qualifications and competence, they examined frame of mind. I think you mentioned this earlier in our interview, that's also important. They said the captain was qualified, the co-pilot was qualified, and to rule out potential human causes, they examined the medical and physiological records, and they found that all three were well rested, prepared, and professional. And then they described the sequence of events and talk about the downdraft. So it seems to me a lot of the blame is going to the weather, but I do notice that under the discussion around the machine, they said even though the machine was serviceable and airworthy, it lacked key safety equipment. And then they actually then made a recommendation on that slide, which is, they hadn't even gotten to recommendations yet. But if you look at the next slide after this, guys, they said that it lacked key safety equipment. They mentioned terrain awareness and warning, advanced navigation and terrain mapping, automatic flight control system, and then said that these safety equipment could have enhanced situational awareness. And then they said they have recommended strongly for aircraft with these additional safety enhancements to be acquired immediately. So it seems to me they are narrowing the options. The weather is obviously a part, but that they are saying that if the aircraft had more enhanced safety features, they may have stood a better chance. This is the way, this is my deduction as a layman. Can we make that deduction from what they put out?
So let me break it down. So basically, any aircraft, based on its role and the purposes for which it was acquired, I mean, that would determine the type of technology that we have on board. I think I've stated earlier that in aviation operations, we are dealing with safety controls, and they are normally branched. There are three areas. So we have technology, we have standard operating procedures, we have training. Okay, so these are the three key areas that we talk about. And so, talking about technology that is on board an aircraft, it's let me draw an analogy to you having a mobile phone. There are so many functionalities on your mobile phone. The basic use of a mobile phone is to communicate, is to text, maybe is to do some video chats. Obviously, you will have other features that sort of makes it sophisticated or enhanced. So yes, it's I mean, for these helicopters and the purposes for which they were acquired, if my memory serves me right, and based on my checks, at least some of them, or they came with the autopilot or the auto stabilization systems. But then that doesn't mean that if they are not working, especially on helicopters, it cannot be used. It's functionally not usable. The point is that if you don't have an autopilot on board, it increases the workload of the crew, because time that they need to constantly be manually flying the aircraft. And for human beings, repetitive tasks induces fatigue, which means that time that can be spent assessing the flight, critical identifying cues around, and to be able to make judgment, safety critical judgment, is spent on what we call motor skills, trying to hold the aircraft in altitude and in straight flight. And so that is where technology comes in to augment, especially the physical or repetitive tasks of a crew. And so if you have an autopilot system, it sort of reduces the cockpit workload, and then we can defer to more higher order safety decision-making abilities or capabilities in the aircraft. We are talking about the helicopter terrain awareness and warning system, ATOS. I think I mentioned it earlier when I met you. What that does is that, helicopters operate normally at very low altitude, most of them, visual contact with the ground. And so it sort of gives the pilot an idea of what is happening around them. Because in terms of situational awareness that you mentioned, it is the ability to know what is happening around you. And that helps you to be able to make a forecast of what will be happening in the next couple of minutes whilst you are in motion. I've just broken it down. And so if you have a technology that is able to map or is able to show you ahead that, hey, there's terrain whilst you are moving forward or sideways or whatever, flying through a high terrain area, it helps the crew in terms of their decision making to avoid those high terrain. Now they are talking about downdraft. Basically, I think he explained it yesterday that if you are operating around mountainous areas, we call them mountain waves, as the air flows around, the hilly areas, they are disturbed. We have what we call rotors, and that can cause downdraft, which sometimes can exceed the capability of the helicopter. And that is what the team is sort of alluding, that they got caught up in a downdraft, which resulted in they impacting the ridge. A little, probably area that I wanted clarification was that normally for an accident like this, the industry practice, we classify it as control flight into terrain. So I'm sort of scratching my head as to why the team decided not to use that term. Because from the narration that, they were flying, they inadvertently entered clouds, which is instrument meteorological condition, when they were supposed to maintain visual, flight throughs, that's visual contact with the ground. And they were trying, from my deduction, they were trying to get out of, that instrument meteorological condition. And in the process, they got caught up in a downdraft and impacted terrain. That is a classic classification of control flight into terrain. So maybe, like I say, if I had read the full report, then I'll be able to concur with them. But that's an area where, in my opinion, I think we may disagree. Because I would have classified this as control flight into terrain. But of course, I don't have the underlying data, so that's my opinion. And so this technology, they are great. If you have it on an aircraft, real-time, data, weather updates, as they suggested, automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, which shows position, altitude, and speed for flight following, both for the aircraft and for operational control command at the Air Force headquarters. It helps us to know where our aircraft is, because radar is limited. Radar is ground-based. So normally, due to line of sight and the need for the aircraft itself, the transponder to repeat and to get back to Accra, it can be limited. ADSB and for instance, is satellite-based. So anywhere, once you have an ADSB on board, even if it's a remote location without ground-based facilities, at least some level of tracking can be done. So that's an area where probably we may disagree.
I see. For we, the laymen, when we saw advanced navigation with terrain mapping, automatic flight control system, and when we read that these safety equipment could have enhanced situational awareness, what we deduced is that if the aircraft was more modern and more equipped with these things, the pilot may probably have known earlier that he was closer to a ridge. Number two, it's possible that if there were some other things on the aircraft, it could have automatically reacted to the downdraft, because I'm told that this automatic flight control system, it's possible that it can still power the aircraft up if the downdraft is pulling it down. I'm not sure if that's something you can confirm. Again, just from a surface reading of the thing they said.
Yes, so basically, microburst, downdrafts, these are, the basic explanation is that if you have airflow over any form, over any feature, it's supposed to be streamlined. It's supposed to be the normal, regular flow. But you know, as air goes over the hill, like I explained, and it starts rushing on the other side of the hill, the air becomes turbulent. And so it's like you put water in a sink and it starts circulating and becomes stronger. So it creates what we call rotors or eddies. The point is, in safety management, first of all, you don't want to get yourself in that position, because you are dealing with the forces of nature which may be beyond the capability of the helicopter or even the crew skill or knowledge. The knowledge is there. You know that, hey, when you are flying in mountainous areas, you are susceptible to mountain waves and turbulence. Okay, so as I would rather focus on things like pre-flight risk assessment tools or safety decision tools. Before the flight, you know you are going to Obuasi. So as part of your flight planning, if you know that you're going to be dealing with low cloud ceilings, most likely it's going to affect your visibility. There is high terrain in that area. As part of your threat error management analysis, you have to do the risk assessment and ask yourself, do you even have the helicopter terrain awareness warning system which will highlight high terrain? You don't have it. And so then the next thing that comes to mind is, what altitude will give me enough clearance so that inadvertently, if I were to be caught in a downdraft, I'll be able to execute what we call an evasive or escape maneuver. In this case, I don't know, and that's one of the areas where the briefing was a bit not clear, because it would have been great to know the altitude just prior to the point of impact. What was the altitude of the helicopter? What was the position, the orientation of the helicopter? What was the magnitude of the downdraft? Because on board the helicopter, the helicopter reacts to the prevailing or the ambient wind conditions. So it will be indicated, on board. The crew will have an idea that, hey, we have a tailwind, we have, a rapidly changing headwind. And so all those data will be captured on the flight data recorder. And that's why I wanted to have a look at it, the graphs. And that will influence, because you know that, hey, the aircraft orientation is changing rapidly. You are being pushed down. And normally the training requires you to execute what we call an evasive maneuver, which means maximum power and then trying to get yourself out. An autopilot, if you are an autopilot, most likely the way it will react, because if the aircraft is going down, the autopilot will react by trying to get the aircraft out of that situation. But that will be exceedingly aggravated. So normally, especially as a pilot, as part of our training, the pilot takes over control and manually adds the power and executes the escape, or what we call the evasive maneuver. So yes, those tools are great. It can help you to anticipate, to see what is right ahead. But at the end of the day, I would have loved to know the reaction of the crew when they realized that they are being caught in a downdraft. What was the evasive? What was the action of the crew? What is the communication between the crew? That area is not very clear. It was not highlighted in the brief. And
yeah, all they said was that flight was uneventful, approximately 90 out of 100 nm. At 9:56, the crew entered IMC and transitioned into IFR. Seconds before impact, the crew stated they could see high ground below. Suddenly, after the helicopter lost height without change of power or pitch altitude and impacted a ridge line at 1370 feet above sea level. So they just gave those 4 bullet points. They didn't.
Yeah, and for me, that doesn't provide enough clarity. I mean, the crew saying they saw the ground below. Was it forward visibility or it was vertical visibility? Because sometimes you can see features below, but you cannot see what is ahead of you. Remember, they were in clouds, they were in IMC conditions. So that is where the helicopter terrain awareness warning system might be helpful, because prior to it maps what is ahead of you. So it will give you an alert that terrain. And at that point, the crew will take the evasive action. That is rapid climb out. And so that is where technology can be helpful in terms of building the situational awareness of the crew. but the briefing is sort of short on the actions of the crew, the altitude of the aircraft, the magnitude of the downdraft, and whether the downdraft was such that it was beyond the capability of the helicopter, which rules out the fact that if, for instance, the downdraft was about 1,000 foot per minute or 1,500 foot per minute, that might exceed the climb capability of this helicopter. So obviously, even the most well-trained crew might find it very challenging to, get out of that situation. And that will lead, obviously, to the control flight into terrain. I still maintain, in my opinion, that this was a control flight into terrain.
Wonderful. Let's end with the safety recommendations. Again, we just have about 7 of them, and it's basically around modernizing the fleet of the Ghana Air Force. It doesn't touch on other things, although it does admit that there are also organizational and systemic factors like limited navigation capacity for en route and remote area weather services. We need enhanced training like simulator and flight monitoring, data monitoring, and flight following surveillance radar. The main recommendations have to do with the need to acquire modern aircraft with certain capabilities and certain features. They mentioned having TAWS and modern navigation system, CVR, FDR with audio and all of this. Do you feel the recommendations are far-reaching enough based on what we've all discussed? Because it seems as if they are basically saying modernize your fleet, get aircraft that can do better sensing, and this will not happen anymore. What do you think?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Bernard. Safety recommendations should be pragmatic. It should be cost-effective. So all the things that have been listed, they are great. But I will even go beyond that, because remember we talked about organizational and systemic factors. Okay, and so that is where I will highly recommend what we call the safety management system, which looks at the organization as a whole. How does our safety policies influences our safety values, within the Ghana Air Force? Okay, you are talking about things like flight data monitoring. Flight data monitoring is just one component of what we call safety assurance. So if we buy all this technology, if we enhance training, how do we know the effectiveness of these things? It is by collecting data from these, and then we asking ourselves whether we are minimizing incidents and accidents, whether we are, achieving our safety objective, which is to make sure that we fly from point A to point B, and we come back safely with minimal risk. And so the data collection process is such that if all these aircraft are equipped with, flight data monitoring recorders, or what we call, collection tools, then every flight that is undertaken by, the aircraft that we buy, anytime they come back from flight, we collect this data. We have analysts who will sit down. They will look at it to make sure that they were flown within the recommended parameters in terms of speed, altitude, the orientation. Anytime there's exceedances, it is a call for us to maybe ask ourselves, what is happening? Why is it that our crew are overspeeding, or maybe they are flying below altitude or something like that, or maybe they encountered a downdraft on one of their flights? We take it back to our training, and then we create what we call scenario-based training, which could be done in a simulator. Or for helicopters, most of the times it is a bit challenging to reenact some of it, but at least for instrument procedures trainers, we could enhance the capabilities and the competencies of flight crew in the Ghana Air Force. Another aspect is safety risk management, and I've already talked about it. So flight risk assessment tools before the flight. What are the resources available to flight crew for them to be able to determine whether this flight is a go, or what we call go or no go? In this case, the captain went to check the weather. If he had had real-time flight support whilst he was en route, he would have known that, hey, getting close to Profi, the cloud ceilings were very low, the visibility is very low. I'm supposed to be flying visual flight rules, and that will proactively or preemptively help the captain to decide that, the risk is too high, I will knock it off, I'm returning back to Accra. And that goes into what we call the organizational factors, which empowers captains, okay, or flight crew. It gives them the sole authority and the power to make safety critical decisions. It is not the pressure, I'm not saying that's what happened, but it shouldn't be pressure from anybody or any external entity.
All right.
It is the crew that should be able to make those safety risk decisions. So it's holistic. It's not just only about buying equipment. It's about looking at the safety management system of the Ghana Air Force.
I would like to thank you very much, Professor Kwesi Ejekum, Associate Professor of Aviation and Aerospace Sciences, and also an aviation accident investigator. We thank you for your insights.
Yeah, Bernard, and a quick one. I would want to also extend my condolences to the folks that were lost today in the El-Wak accident. It's very unfortunate, and it just goes back to the fact that in every activity, we have to understand the hazards and apply safety risk management to forestall such accidents. So my condolences.
Thank you. When we come back, we'll speak to Nanaya Wakwada from the Bureau of Public Safety on both this air accident and what happened at El-Wak that my first guest alluded to. Later on, we would also bring other guests in as we discuss what we call a double tragedy. This is the point of view. Stay with us.
No matter where we wander, Africa always calls us home. And here in Ghana, Stanbic Corporate and Investment Banking, together with clients like Gensa Energy and Goldfields, is driving sustainable growth.
The transition from fossil fuel to cleaner energy is quite imperative for the growth of a continent that we call home.
We want to contribute to delivering affordable gas for industrialization in Africa.
Stanbic is a bank that is focused on impacting lives, and Gensa has the same vision and mission.
Having a reliable source of power has helped our business and our operations in a significant way.
At Stanbic Bank, we bring businesses together, empower communities, and invest in the next generation. Stanbic Corporate and Investment Banking, driving growth, creating impact.
Kwame and his uncle are almost here.
Wait a minute. This one too, friend of Kwame.
Wait, Kwame. As in the same Kwame again?
Yes, mommy.
I'm the second coming. Into all this tension just to reintroduce that broke boy from Kaswa.
Why would you deceive the family like this again?
Now I understand the whole delay. Trotro from Kaswa. Why wouldn't he be late? Obeying later.
Of course.
Stop 712 hush, stop 712 hush. Yeah, you go be the luckiest. Go be from Georgia, be luckiest. From not the cause she be luckiest. Yeah, you go be luckiest. No matter why you're luckiest. Everybody go be the luckiest.
That's Kwame!
Send your God the apple boom. If you put it at all, so would the coming of the Son of Man be. Is that his car?
Star 712 hash. Choose your ticket. Enter your lucky number. Follow the prompts and let destiny handle the rest.
This promotion is regulated by the NLA on the Caritas platform.
This tote pays 3 salaries. This book keeps 2 children in school. This cream supports 5 households. Every product creates a job.
Afro-quality. Buy African, build Africa.
We're still discussing safety by reviewing the committee that examined the August 6th helicopter crash report, and now also the tragedy that took the life of 6 people today at the El-Wak Sports Stadium. My guest for the next round is Nanaya Wakwada. Before I talk to him, let me just show you some scenes from El-Wak Stadium earlier today, where thousands of young people had gone for the Greater Accra version of a national recruitment exercise. So here you have it from the outside of the stadium. You would also hear from some of the recruits talking to our reporter, Masaudu.
Around 11, that was 11 p.m. So now they haven't yet attended to me.
Came here yesterday 11 p.m.
Yes, I was here around 11 there. Yeah, they haven't attended to me.
And you've been waiting throughout 11 p.m. yesterday?
It's almost 11 p.m. It's almost 12 o'clock now. Yeah, so you can just imagine the kind of stress I've been through. Yeah, still no one is attending to it. So,
what have they been saying? What have the military been telling you?
Oh, they are just trying to let us be in another whereby they can just pick a group of people, then they'll just go and do their own for them. So since morning, some of us will just be on the sun. We are unlucky. Let me put it that way. We have been unlucky, so they haven't called us yet. So we are just hoping that they'll just call some of us so that we just finish and go back home.
Have you eaten?
No, I drank water.
There is information about some of your colleagues, some passing away, some, sustaining injuries and all of that. Does that scare you?
Yeah.
Or frighten you?
I witnessed one. Yeah. And then, as of now, the girl is always on my eyes, although I don't know her. Yeah, but I can see she's really out of breath. She's just trying to hold my neck, and I'm also suffering. They've tried pulling her out of the crowd, but it's not going. Behold, someone also pulled me. I don't know where their hand came from. I just thank God Almighty that I'm still alive.
Wow. So you witnessed the moment leading to her passing when she was rushed to the hospital?
Yeah, I was not there when they were rushing her, but I saw her when she was just about to lose her life.
Wow.
And also do about it because I was also suffering. It got to a time I don't know where my documents, my bags were.
Yeah. It should be traumatizing.
Yeah, like that's what I'm going through right now. I feel like I'm also a dead person right now. Yeah, because what I saw in the morning was too much. Yeah, what I saw in the morning was too much. So that was it. I just don't want to talk about it anytime. So
that was Fauzu Masaudu speaking earlier to one of the recruits, narrating what he saw. The initial figure was announced, of course, as 6. Initially, we thought there were 6 more, but we were told that of the 28 people who were casualties, 6 had died, and they were all females. There were 12 in fairly critical condition, and another 5 in intensive care. So this is pretty serious. To almost 30 people hurt in the stampede. The president has asked the armed forces to stop the Accra recruitment exercise today. So they've been asked to go home. The defense minister acting, Kazelatu Forsen, who by the way will on Thursday present the budget, addressed parliament this afternoon. And later on I will show you the highlights. He gives the official briefing of what happened at El-Wak. I may bring that to you, but let me interview Nanayo Akwada briefly on the aircraft report before we come to this. Nanayo, thanks for joining us and I thank you for your patience. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Bernard, and good evening to your viewers.
I'm sure you followed the press briefing yesterday by the team that did the investigation into the August 6 crash. What did you make of their analysis and their conclusions?
Well, I think that we continue to remember the dead and may their souls continue to rest in peace. Yesterday's presentation, I think, was apt, but classic of our incident investigation reports and media briefing, there still remains many more questions than answers, which of course Prof. Daniel Lekum has done great justice to it, has asked a lot of questions. And for us at the Bureau of Public Safety, we'll continue to hammer on this, that there is a need for us as a country to move away from keeping some of these public safety incident investigation reports secret. It is only by publishing these reports fully, and in some cases where national security issues are concerned, redact these and put them out there, that we can have full closures to some of these incidents. Apart from the technical, very technical issues of questions raised by Professor Ejekum, we at the Bureau also have some questions. Okay, they talk about the pilot being a Class D, a Class C pilot with white instrument rating, whatever that means. Okay, we are told that they have classes up to A, and the A is the highest. Why should we not have any Class A pilot or Class B pilot? We only have D, which is just a step away from the lowest. Now, with this kind of classification of a pilot, what are the privileges this pilot have? And with white instrument, whatever white instrument means, what are the privileges of this pilot? Is he allowed to fly just transport, combat, commercial, day, night? What kind of privileges does this pilot have? And those things are still not clear to us. It is instrumental that you pointed out that all the recommendations, to a very large extent, that were made in this report borders on, we need to get this, we need to buy that, we need to have this, we need to install that. But what about the people who were managing the system? I mean, it's perfect if the people did great, if they did a great job, but we need to access this report to see whether, in the opinion of the very respected investigators, they did not find any issues with the people who were managing the system. And that if they found issues, the public needs to know so that we can track these things. So I am particularly very disappointed because we've been calling for investigation reports to be made public since time immemorial. Market fires are national security, building collapses which involve mass casualties are national security documents, explosions are national security documents, plane crashes are national security documents. We just don't have anything to track. We just don't have anything to learn lessons from. So it is important that JM's administration act differently. I am very disappointed that this report, I did not get a sense that the committee intends to work with the presidency to make this report publicly available. If you go to the US, the National Transportation Safety Board publishes all aviation incident reports, okay? And they are publicly available. You can access it from anywhere in the world. If the Chemical Safety Board, all occupational incidents that comes to their attention is investigated, the report is out there. In the UK, the El-Wak Stampede, they all put these things out. What is it that administration upon administration in Ghana is hiding in these reports? The questions that Professor Jekum has asked as a technical person are legitimate questions that need answer. They are legitimate questions to let us see whether the investigative committee has done such a thorough job. If we don't have the report, how do we ever do any meaningful public discussion on it? How do we ever track anything, any recommendations in there that must be undertaken? The only thing investigation upon investigation in Ghana have brought to the public knowledge are on procurement issues. If market bends after the investigations, we are told we need to construct new, we need to do this, we need to, if there's an explosion, we need to do that. Never a time are we holding people who are accountable for ensuring that these mishaps in the first place are averted or they do not happen responsible. And it bothers us a lot. It's very disturbing how we want to proceed as a country in 2025. So there are questions hanging around the neck of the investigation committee, and I believe that if they work with the presidency to publish this report in its full form, the public will be most appreciative and we can move forward with this.
Wonderful. So beyond the press briefing that was done to give highlights, you think the full report needs to be out so that you and other technical people can study it to understand the sequence and the logic behind the conclusions and the recommendations, correct?
Absolutely, Bernard. You see, in order to build a safe society, it is a joint effort by the public, the industry players, the experts, and government.
Okay.
In a situation where none of us can participate in this meaningful, we always get shortchanged. And that is evident in what we have seen in the last decade. Nobody is holding anybody accountable, because where the accountability really lies is shrouded or is kept secret from the public's eyes.
All right.
And from
Let me take Colonel Festus Abuaji's view on this before we come to El-Wak. Colonel, thank you so much for your time. I know you've had a very busy day today. So my two first guests, the first one, you know him from the previous program, Professor Ejekum. He says he's constrained in commenting fully on what was presented to the media yesterday because he would have loved to read the full report. So we limited our discussion to some of the highlights presented yesterday in the press event. And Nanaya Akwada, Dr. Akwada, also from BPS, is asking for same, that whilst the highlights presented are good, they need the full report to be able to make complete sense of everything. What are your thoughts? By the way, have you seen the full report? Let me start with that first, before we come to whether you think that the public should have it. Colonel, have you seen the full report, or you also depend on
I haven't.
the highlights?
I have not seen the report.
Okay.
And I was not able to watch the entire presentation yesterday because I had some commitments here and there. Now, since then, I've seen snippets of it, especially on social media.
Okay.
We deserve, as Ghanaians, as a country, we deserve to see the report beyond the presentation, because this is a public interest issue. The lives that have been lost, have affected, the loss of lives have affected several people and several organizations, and raised fundamental issues about our preparedness, in terms of emergencies, and then our preparedness to reduce disasters. If I stay on that point, where Captain Fojo emphasized the downdraft and suggested that it was attributable, or the contributory factor was the weather, I had raised issues about the weather in the paper that I wrote. First of all, the weather was inclemental. It was foggy, at least in the impact area, and for a greater part of southern Ghana. It was drizzling. The cloud base was low, up to 600 feet. Visibility had reduced from the standard 5,000 for helicopters to 4,000. So therefore, what we know is that this flight was authorized under special visual flight rules, because the weather was marginal. That raises questions about whether indeed the flight should even have taken off, should have been executed. We need to answer that question. The information that has been adduced in the presentation does suggest that the flight should not have taken off. And I've heard from other snippets that the plane dropped height several times before the impact area, because the pilot was trying to avoid the clouds. Now, if you had a cloud base of 600, for instance, and I think Professor Giacomo will say that, you need a clearance of about 1,000 feet. So you need to climb up 1,600. Then you enter Norfolk. The alternative is to descend. Now, the descent happened to be in an elevated area where the Dampier rainforest had a peak of 1,260, and the impact point was about 825 feet. So the descent was not an option. But because I think Professor Ajiku might have mentioned it, the pilot might have been suffering from this spatial disorientation. The best option, in the absence of the instruments that were not available on the flight, was for him to descend. And that descent coincided with the forest range, and then we had the impact. So that's an issue. I think I've read somewhere too that the flight was delayed.
Yes, so they delayed for an hour for takeoff. They were to take off at 8 o'clock, but they had to take off about 12 minutes past 9 because of inclement weather. And by the way, on the point about the descent, what Professor Jekum said was he also wanted more information on the exact same thing you were asking, because he felt like it was a controlled flight into the...
That's right.
Yes, so he feels like the explanation of the downdraft alone, he thinks more details are needed, which is why the full report will be necessary, because you are raising similar issues around the way the conclusion is that, well, because of the downdraft, the thing just came down suddenly. There needs to be more information about how it actually came down and what really the pilot tried to do. So that's a fair point. But it seems as if the conclusion is very quick on we need to modernize the fleet, which may be great, but Mr. Akwada is saying that it seems like a lot of times when there's a disaster, we tend to go for the procurement solution. So there's a market fire, let's build new markets. There's an aircraft accident, let's buy modern fleet, without looking at maybe the possible institutional or human or other things that need to be repaired as well. Do you share that view?
Indeed. In my paper, I made reference to a subculture that we call the president must go. In other words, the need, the agency for the Ghana Air Force to fly executive flights, that need, that agency overrules all the operational considerations. So even if, and may he so rest in peace, Squadron Leader Alana made that aeronautical decision that I think Professor would have explained. In a way, he made it under pressure, saying that, okay, I'm going to try to fly the mission, knowing very well that he was going to encounter several obstacles as a result of the inclement weather. Now, let's recall that on 6 August, in the southern part of Ghana, 2 other Z9 flights for some civilian institutions, at least one including VRA, had to abort. One landed and aborted completely. The other one landed and then after a while continued. All of this adds to the idea that the question is, should that flight have been executed? Should it have been flown? And I'm suggesting that, given what we know, we should have overruled that culture of the institutional culture of the president must go. But be that as it may, it's happened. Secondly, some have referred to the helicopter as a skeleton, the skeleton in the air. It may be the most accurate analogy for describing the helicopter. Can you imagine that a president of Ghana drives around the country in the type of Isuzu that Uber uses? Can you imagine? So the fact that we must fly the president in a helicopter does not mean any helicopter whatsoever. If at a point in time we had 6 of these Z9s, maybe 1, maybe 2 of them should have had the instruments, the helicopter terrain advanced warning technology, as well as the emergency location the one that bounces off satellite and so on. We should have had them. But this helicopter was just a bare bone helicopter flying executive missions and then flying in inclement weather, adverse conditions, marginal as the Air Force will call it. And then we had this accident. The other dimensions we have not discussed, because probably the presentation didn't cover that, is our response to emergencies, which is as equally critical as the accident itself. We have not talked about that. 6 August till today, I have not heard any sustained public education as to how local communities, who invariably will be the ones when accidents occur, should behave, should conduct themselves to preserve the crash site and not to tamper, and least of all, not to vandalize the place and take trophies. We have not done that. No education. So even if we go and buy more modern helicopters fixed with instruments, granted that accidents would occur, the next accident that occurs, the local communities will go there and be salvaging. We need to have that device. Then let me finish on this point. The presentation, I think, also touched on, but one of your colleagues asked about monitoring. Monitoring is not only the one via technology. Monitoring is also that beyond the radar, there must be 2 sets of radio, the VHF and the UHF, so that air traffic control, whether Accra or Kumasi, even when the aircraft is off radar, must be able to talk to the pilot. And the pilot and other base installations, either at Air Force Base or Kumasi or wherever, must also be able to talk. The question is, I'm not sure that the presentation answered that. Did the Z9 have those radios, VHF and UHF? And if they had, what types of communications took place between air traffic control, Accra, Kumasi, and then, let's say, Air Force Base, Accra? Which then brings me to the point that, and I think in the discussion that we had, Prof mentioned it, it's about time that we married the civilian air traffic control with the military one or with the Air Force. It is not at all ideal that in any country, civil aviation air traffic control will be independent of everybody else and not allow the military access to their installations. Thirdly, why hasn't the Ghana Air Force, or could the Ghana Air Force deploy its own air traffic controllers? There's a special name for that I think Prof can mention. So if an aircraft is scheduled to go to Kumasi and we don't have an air terminal, assuming, the Air Force could deploy these technicals to go there and be able to communicate with the aircraft. So these are broader debates that we must have.
All right. I'm taking a break. When I come back, we are going to go to El-Wak because, as we've been told, 28 casualties, 6 deaths, 5 in ICU, 12 in critical condition, following a stampede in the Army recruitment. We'll discuss that. My guest for this segment still Professor Dr. Nanaya Wakwada, Bureau for Public Safety, and Colonel Retired Festus Abuaji. Stay with us.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the winner, President and Chair of the Board of the Trade Finance Bank of Africa, Afri-Exim Bank, Professor Benedict O. Rama.
In navigating financial challenges in our region for sustainable development, when we look at challenges, we also know that challenge is one side of a coin. You have challenges, we also have opportunities. And that is why Afri-Exim Bank has grown the fastest in times of crisis.
I also thank organizers for considering me worthy of this prestigious award, which I will cherish all through my life.
The Africa Prosperity Champions Awards APCA and Presidential Gala Dinner unites visionaries from heads of state, business leaders, social change makers to innovators to celebrate African excellence in order to encourage a new generation of leaders. More than an awards ceremony, this event declares that Africa's narrative is one of triumph and prosperity. We celebrate a new story where African solutions guide us forward. Each honor exemplifies the vast potential of our continent. The 4th edition of the Africa Prosperity Champions Awards and Presidential Gala Dinner takes place on February 6, 2026 at the Kempinski Gold Coast Hotel in Accra, Ghana. To attend, you may contact +233 536 098325 or send an email to protocol@africaprosperity.network. You may also visit africaprosperitynetwork.com for your tickets now.
Kwame and his uncle are almost here.
Wait a minute. This one too, your friend Kwame.
Wait, Kwame. As in the same Kwame again?
Yes, mommy.
I'm the second coming. Into all this tension just to reintroduce that broke boy from Kaswa.
Why would you deceive the family like this again?
Now I understand the whole delay. Trotro from Kaswa. Why wouldn't he be late? Obey you later.
Of course.
Star 712 hash, star 712 hash. Yeah, you go feel the luckiest. Coffee from Georgia be luckiest. From Natepia, cause she be luckiest. Yeah, you go feel be luckiest. No matter why you're luckiest. Everybody go be the luckiest.
That's Kwame!
Send your God the apple boom. If you put it with a so would the coming of the son of man be. Is that his car?
Dial star 712 hash. Choose your ticket. Enter your lucky number. Follow the prompts and let destiny handle the rest.
This promotion is regulated by the NLA on the Caritas platform.
Around 11 p.m. So now they haven't yet attended to me.
Came here yesterday 11 p.m.
Yes, I was here around 11 there. Yeah, they haven't attended to me.
And you've been waiting throughout 11 p.m. yesterday.
It's almost 11 p.m. It's almost 12 o'clock.
Good morning.
Yeah, please your name.
My name is Adam Ubeida.
From where?
Ashama.
All right. So, what time did you arrive here?
Arrived here exactly 5:30.
5:30.
Yeah.
And have you been able to have access?
Not yet because the queue is too long.
Okay. And which field and which category have you filed for?
Infantry.
Infantry. All right.
So the last shot of the vehicle driving was taken around 5 a.m. The earlier shot was in the afternoon around midday, and we had interviewed some of the people there. Let me come to Dr. Akwada again on this. So this happened across the country. Accra had the big numbers, and we just saw what happened. 6 people have died, and 12 are in critical condition. 5 are in intensive care unit. President has asked that this be halted in Accra. We've heard the defense minister acting speak to parliament to sort of give the background to this. What do you make of what has happened, Mr. Akwada?
Thank you. Again, we want to extend our condolences to the dead, and we pray for speedy recovery for the injured. I think earlier in the morning, I had the occasion to discuss this issue with the Vice Chairman of the Parliamentary Defense committee on another sister station where I called for the exercise to be suspended and also investigations to be done, possibly an independent one. And then once again, the report made public. I did call for a safety assessment or a safety audit to be performed prior to some of these exercises where people come from all walks of life to gather in one place for recruitment purposes. It's about time that we actually develop the manual for these exercises. If me, as an individual, I go to organize a program at El-Wak or Accra Sports Stadium, wherever, I will be expected to be guided by occupancy, dictates, where for every space, the National Fire Service have dictated the occupancy levels for every facility, and I'll be expected to go by those dictates. Today, if I were a musician and at my musical program, the place is overpopulated, over capacity, and 6 deaths occurred, I'm sure I'll be seeing some lawsuits. And so if I were part of the members of these people who are dead, I will be talking to a lawyer by now, trying to rope in the Ghana Armed Forces, the Attorney General, and all relevant parties to this suit. Look, Bernard, we must grow above this. State institutions must be bound by occupational safety and health regulations, just as everybody is bound by those. Okay? And two, I am also very, very disappointed that our military, and I probably, Colonel Festus may disagree with me on this, our military over time is losing its discipline, whether they have to go into a town to go and appease the death of one of their own with so many human rights infringements and nothing happens, whether being called to participate in public safety, civilian public safety issues, they act in excess, people die, people get maimed, people's livelihood are thrown off course for their entire lifetime and nothing happens to anybody. And so that indiscipline is growing. And if we don't take steps to address this, probably one day we are going to sit down and realize that we will not have a country again. So it is important that while we called for a halting of the program for reassessment to be done before it's reopened, has happened, it is important that we look with the investigations that are going to be done, actually hold people accountable for this. Whoever had access to data, had access to sending text messages for so many people to come to one area, to congregate in one area for this purpose, those persons must be identified and dealt with so that we can build the military that we want. We should not let the general Ghanaian indiscipline, as we say it, slip into the rank and file of the military. That is dangerous.
Okay.
And that's what we...
Let me give you two updates. In Kumasi, 5 people collapsed at Babayara, and the military also suspended the exercise there. So even though in Accra people died, in Kumasi it was just loss of consciousness. Luckily nobody died in Kumasi. 1 person was in critical condition at the Emina Government Hospital in Ofori-Krom. 4 others were receiving treatment in Ashanti South Government Hospital. Number 2, the armed forces has set up an investigative board. So this evening we're told that they've set up a board. The armed forces have formed a board to probe the stampede that took place at El-Wak. Let me take Colonel's initial thoughts on this matter. What do you make of the scenes we've just witnessed and the casualties as reported?
Let me express very sincere condolences to all the bereaved families and indeed to all of us as Ghanaians. This incident is extremely unfortunate because we have come very, very far. Some years ago, everybody from any corner of Ghana had to come to Accra. Initially, it wasn't a problem. But then we realized that as a result of a number of factors, including the spike in unemployment, the numbers were increasing. So some years ago, the decision was taken to decentralize the first phase and have it conducted at the region, just so that the numbers will be manageable. That is where we have come from. Now, despite that, given that people were informed by text messages electronically, so there was a database of the numbers expected to congregate in Accra. And that number, we are told, is about 21,000 souls. Now, my analysis is that, Bernard, if it's true, as one radio station said, that 9 tables were set up for processing the 21,000, even if one person took 1 minute, it was going to take 38 working hours, not 38 working hours.
Wow.
Our working hours are not from 6 to 6, so that's not 12 hours. In other words, we required in excess of 5 days to process the 21,000 around the 9 tables, unless we set up more tables so that we could reduce the number. The whole idea is that the planning should have factored in the quantum of the people who were expected to congregate at El-Wak. And that number was excessive. So they should have been grouped. Monday, X number to X number should arrive by text message. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Probably, if we had managed the numbers through the planning in this way and set up appropriate infrastructure, call it safety infrastructure, the stampede might not have occurred. Now, I'm not comparing the military to the police, but one of the last recruitments that former IGP Dampari did, we saw it on TV. He erected tents and deployed seeds and water for these recruits to go and sit under while they were going through the process. Now, I happened to be going to Burma camp in the morning. From 37, I encountered this crazy traffic, and I didn't know what was happening ahead of me until I went through the traffic lights. And then all of a sudden, I saw, these huge numbers on the other side of the road, the airport side, the El-Wak side, all across from one end to the other. And then whilst at Burma camp, doing whatever I was doing, I got the message that 6 people had perished. It's more about planning. Now, I don't want to doubt the integrity of the armed forces. So yes, there must be investigation. I think the armed forces must be credited with the honesty to do an honest job and investigate the circumstances under which the stampede occurred. And stampedes occur around bottlenecks when large numbers of people want to go through a small opening or avenue. We need to come to the bottom of that so that we can find the remedies to that. But we have got experiences behind us. This thing should not have happened in 2025. It shouldn't. Given that we even resorted to the use of technology. So it's an accident that must happen, but we need to, get to the bottom of it. And as the president has said and the minister has said in Parliament, the event has been suspended, and then a new dates also will be announced. And I hope the new days will spread the numbers across several days and not asked 21,000 people to come back to, Accra. On the compensation side, Bernard, as a human being, I've got a diary of occasions in which I might have lost my life. One driving a military vehicle that we call the Pin Squad. Assuming that I had died at the time as a lieutenant, and assuming that even in, the Champions days, because this was about 1975, 76, and so on, my family had been given 40,000 Ghana, even assuming the Champions time. My wealth now is many, many times more than that. So this idea of computing compensation around 25,000 Ghana cedis, 40,000 Ghana cedis is an insult. Doesn't take into consideration the potentials that these individuals that have lost their lives, might have realized. Any one of them could be a sergeant major. In fact, even as other ranks. In fact, these were going to be, I don't know whether officers or whatever, but even as other ranks, some of them could leave and go to university and come back, become officers, and one day be very high-ranking persons. So those who are going to look at the compensation must factor in the total loss to the families that are bereaved, and not this funny figure, 40,000 Ghana cedis. When every 4 years MPs go and take, I don't know, is it 600,000, that kind of stuff, Let's avoid compensation by getting the mechanisms right, and then everybody goes home happy. 6 female soldiers, bereaved. I'm not saying the women are the weaker sex, whatever, but whatever the situation was, is the 6 who have died are females.
Yes.
That makes it more tragic.
Yeah. Thank you for your time and your insights, Colonel Festus Abuaji, and also Dr. Nanayo Akwada. Earlier on, we also had Professor Kwesi Ejekum. We've been unpacking 2 issues. The August 6 helicopter crash report, we've discussed that, and also the recruitment to the armed forces and the tragedy that occurred earlier today. May the souls of all the departed rest in peace. And may those who are in critical condition and those who are unwell receive speedy recovery. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.